Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back from the warp. It's been 4, maybe 5 months since we last chatted. And you know how time passes in the warp. For me, it's an eternity. The 4 months. For you, usually a couple seconds. But anyways, I digress. In this video, you get to find out how I am a princeps of sorts, how I operate my Warhound Titan on a daily basis. That keeps me in the warp, busy, not talking to you lovely people. But we'll also be getting into the Leviathan novel and continuing it. And while we're reading the novel, we'll be painting this lovely parasite of Mortex. So yeah, in this video, you'll find out what I do for a living in order to pay for my plastic crack hobby. And we'll be continuing on with Leviathan, as I previously stated. If this is your first time on this channel, please, don't mind, drop a comment, say hi, have a conversation. Also, if it is your first time, you know what to do. We'll put a link in, I'd say up here, either there or there, for you to start off this channel with the Leviathan novel, the beginning, and journey along with us. You can catch up. You can watch this one, or you can go back. It's up to you. But anyways, with that being said, I welcome everybody back from the warp, and let's get into this video. The Governor's Palace, Chapter 19, Salamis Hive, Samnium Province, Regium. Governor Sirach looked out through armor-glass doors. Salamis sprawled below him, a collision of industry and decay. Cargo transports, air cars, and guided tugs swarmed through the smog, lights blinking as they banked and looped through the city. He watched them for a while, counting the fires he could see raging in hab blocks and warehouses. It was shocking how quickly things could fall apart. He turned his back on the scene. His office was sparsely decorated. His predecessor had crammed it with gilded tables, portraits, and overstuffed couches. But Sirach had cleared all that away the day he took office. There was a scratched metal trestle table covered in charts, architect's plans and scrolls, and a few uncomfortable-looking spindle-backed chairs. Other than that, the room was empty, apart from a cabinet-shaped cogitator chuntering quietly to itself in the corner, spewing reams of parchment into a metal basket. Did the Ultramarines lie? He wondered aloud. His aide Lanek was perched on one of the chairs, scowling and tapping her feet on the floor. She looked up in surprise. Sirach took a deep drag on an iho stick, holding the fumes in his lungs until he felt lightheaded. Lanek shuffled on her seat. Can Ultramarines lie? Didn't the Emperor breed that out of them? They're better than us. She licked her lips, looking at the papers. Perfect. Sirach took another deep drag on the iho stick, struggling to keep his hand steady. Nothing about this situation is perfect. Do you remember what they said? They said they would crush the Xenos. He gave a vague wave. Somewhere out there, in the void. And all I had to do was keep people calm. It was taking all his strength of will not to howl. He had heard the stories. He had seen the things that were landing in the fields and the forests. Better be careful what you say, she warned. The confessor will be here any minute. She lowered her voice. It's not wise to criticize the Emperor's finest. She walked over to the window to stand beside him. They never displayed affection in public, but in the absence of the servants, she squeezed his hand and spoke softly. Look how many times we have been through hell. Plenty, and usually with a self-serving tyrant at the helm, rather than an honest man like you. This is different. You know it is. We're not just facing an angry mob this time. He rested his forehead on hers, then loosened her hand and walked over to the table. Why in the name of the Emperor did they choose me as governor? I never sought power. I didn't want any of this. Maybe that's why. Maybe it's because you're better than all the power-hungry crooks who came before. The bar wasn't set very high. She moved some papers and lifted up a drawing that was different from all the others. Rather than technical schematic, it was a sketch, a drawing of Salamis remade with open spaces and cleaner air. None of the others would even dream of this. He gave a non-committal grunt. A dream is all it will ever be. At least you had the dream. At least you aspired to something. He smiled at her, wishing he could see himself as she did. I wonder what the confessor wants. There was a knock on the door, and Lanek headed over to open it. We're about to find out. Sirach stubbed out his iho stick on the desk and waited to greet his guests. Captain Karpova came in first, tense and glowering, followed by the haughty, long-limbed Sergeant Vollard. They saluted him like he was a Lord Commander Militant. So, I already built the parasite of Mortex, as you can see. But on his base, I made him fly lower, I guess you could say, so his wings extend past the normal base that Games Workshop supplies. So, what we're going to do is we're going to take one of these containers, if you know, and then we're going to super glue him on there so that you can see his wingtip doesn't connect. And that way when you display him, he won't be dragging. So yeah, let's do this.
Is that so? Tell me how you really feel. Hey? Come on. You're being all vocal. Tell the crowd. Tell everybody on the channel what's going on, what's new in your life.
Then stepped aside as Confessor Thurgow swept into the room, hands clasped in benediction as he smiled at everyone. Sirach was aware that he should attempt some platitudes, perhaps even offer them a drink. He was also aware that in front of such powerful people, he should avoid plain speech and keep his cards to his chest. His awareness of those things only served to worsen his mood as he barked out, Castamon was wrong. Karpova and the sergeant had already noticed the plans on the table, and were frowning as they tried to decipher his notes. Confessor Thurgow gave him a sympathetic smile. So, after he's done drawing on the extra, what shall we call it, base? We're going to go in with some Green World stuff, or Green Stuff World, whichever way you want to call it, air dry clay, modeling clay, and then we're going to padding up the base a little bit more, and what I'm going to do is we're going to make it have a rocky texture, and then so it makes it kind of like he's on a cliffside. And then after it's done drying, because it's going to take a couple hours for it to dry, then we'll hit it with the primer and base coat. Then we can start getting into the painting, and then afterwards we'll get into the finer details. What do you want, Governor? He tapped the papers in front of him. This isn't a few Xeno ships loitering at the edge of the system. This is an invasion. Full scale. Here on Regium. I got these reports from the Illumnum orbital before it went off-grid. They show the whole of Samnium province, from the Kurko Mountains right down to the Vanand Peninsular. He tapped the blurry shape. This is the fortress at Xerax. And this, up here, is Salamis. And these dark areas, here, and here, are enormous swarms of predators. Predators of a kind that no one has ever seen before. He heard the tremor in his voice, but could do nothing to stifle it. And this is where the predators destroyed the processing plants at Ereza. He snatched a seat from the table and held it up to the confessor. This is how it looked before the swarm. He lifted the other sheet, and this was after they passed. Nothing left, just ruins, barren earth and bodies. The whole outpost wiped out in a few hours. It's like they ate the damned place. He jabbed at the printout again. The same thing here, and here. All of these outposts wiped out. Everyone dead. Captain Karpova took the sheet from his hand, spread it out on the table again, peered at the details, tracing her fingers over the lines. They're heading for Xerax. These groups that came south from the foothills emerged at different points. But look at how they're all coming together. They're massing, and they're all headed south to the fortress. Apart from these? Said Surok, still unable to steady his voice. These ones that's appeared near Shalib? So, it's the next day. Air clay is dry. I put the resin rocks on here so that it will give more of a rocky crag surface to look like he's on a perch coming down. But yeah, so I made the resin rocks myself, just some UV resin and a mold that I had. The air clay works quite well to make some fillers and whatnot. It's not your Tamiya putty, it doesn't get super hard, but it is uber light, so that's a beneficial thing. But now, as I said, we're going to go in with Musu paint, black, prime it, and then we're going to hit it with the bone color. We're going to hit it with the purples. We're going to hit it with the creams. We're going to hit it with the whites and all of those lovely colors that make up my Leviathan paint scheme while we read the Leviathan novel. So yeah, have a video. Watch me paint. Hope you guys are enjoying. I don't know if you guys care, but I just found this out. Kind of a dork moment, nerding out here with my gear. The little chain on your DJI Osmo Audio receiver can literally turn your camera on when it's linked. Fun fact. But yeah, let's get back into me making Tyranids and Warhammer and all that other stuff you actually came for. Not gear rip. City? They seem to be headed straight for us. Karpova nodded. Smaller numbers, though, compared to the swarms moving on Xerax. Surok stared at her. The Ultramarines said they would deal with the Xenos. All we had to do was keep order in the meantime. She stared at him. Situations change. So what do we do? I tried to contact Castamon, but he's not at Xerax. I spoke to a sergeant. He said to hold my nerve and wait further instructions when Castamon returns from Port Dura. Hold my nerve? What in the name of the Emperor is that supposed to mean? Karpova was still studying the maps. It means you follow the orders you have been given, maintain stability, maintain output, and defend Salamis. She tapped another printout, a schematic of the hive. You have void shield generators, power shields, and defense lasers? And you have the 401st? We can hold this place until doomsday if we need to. Exactly, Confessor Thurgo smiled. Although what? Said Karpova, snapping her gaze onto the priest. Well, we haven't spoken to Lieutenant Castamon since we saw him at Xerax, he shrugged. Sometimes, and I'm sure you know this better than anyone, Captain, if a chain of command has been broken, it's more important to honor the intent of the order than to slavishly adhere to the details. Karpova narrowed her eyes. Forgive me, he said, taking the map. Here's Salamis, threatened by a smaller Xenos force, and very well defended, thanks to Lieutenant Castamon, with powerful void shields, lasers, and thousands of local troops, including your own magnificent regiment. And here we have Xerax, threatened by an enormous and defended by a tiny garrison. Castamon told us to protect the hive, said Surok, worried by where the conversation was going. But why, Governor? Thurgow smiled. He asked us to hold the line because if Salamis fell, he will be exposed from the north. He waved the paper. Now there's a vast host descending on him from the north. That's exactly what he feared. So we should stick to the letter of his command and watch as he dies? He looked around at them all. What hope will there be for any of us if Castamon and the Ultramarines are wiped out? What hope will there be for Regium? What hope will there be for entire Sanctus line? Karpova nodded slowly and looked at the maps again. He sent the entire 401st up here. I think he knew a large-scale force might approach from the north. He just thought it would hit the hive rather than bypass it. The Xenos are not behaving as he expected. You might be right. We might need to adapt to the developing situation. She pointed out another location on the map. What's this here? To the south of the Xenos. Korasa Gorge, said Sirach, battling a wave of nausea. And is that the only route through that line of peaks? Well, yes. I suppose the alternative is to head 500 miles east into the forest and loop around the Kuroko Mountains. Then that explains the disposition of the Xeno swarms. Look, they're making all for that pass. It's the quickest route to the fortress. But if we hit them there, we'd create a bottleneck. We could hold them indefinitely. She nodded eagerly. Perhaps even do more than hold them back. These creatures win by weight of numbers. Most of them are mindless. Their primary tactic is to overwhelm defenses by swarming them from every direction, heedless of their own losses. But in a confined space, like a gorge, that tactic would not be available to them. The vanguard would be small. We would have complete control over the situation. And if I positioned the artillery on the surrounding slopes, here and here, we could inflict heavy losses on the creatures further back. We could create an extremely efficient crossfire. Captain, said Confessor Thurgow, staring at her in excitement. Let me explain why I needed to speak to all of you this morning. Since we reached the hive, I have been performing my duties to the best of my ability. I have preached sermons to the people on the brink of ruin, people whose faith is wavering. He nodded to his companion, the glowering brute called Broth. And my brethren have dealt with many groups who have already lost their faith, punishing the vile idolatry and misbelief. Between sermons and the executions, we have made steady progress. He looked earnestly at Governor Sirach. We are purging Salamis of sin, Governor. You no longer need to worry about the souls of your citizens. But, he began pacing the room, swinging his scepter, I have known for a few weeks now that the Emperor requires more of me. He saw the frown on Sirach's face. Let me explain. My career in the Adeptus Ministronum has progressed at an unusual speed. I'm not telling you this through vanity, but because I sense the Emperor's hand behind my success. Every crucial decision I have made has been driven by what I can only describe as visions. Sirach glanced at Lanik, knowing she would treat this comment with the same skepticism as him. She was careful not to meet his eye, keeping her gaze on the wide-eyed confessor as he hurried back and forth. Whenever I have reached an impasse, either spiritually or in more worldly matters, I have prayed until the answer presented itself. He grinned at them all. And, by the throne, it works. Every time. And here, on Regium, I have felt the Emperor's presence clearer than ever before. He was close, my friends, so close I can almost touch him. So close that even before I asked him for guidance, he waved the maps and the charts. Even before all of this, he spoke to me. He showed me, with more clarity than ever before, what I was sent here to do. Sirach felt like he was in a room with one of the raving addicts who sometimes accosted him on the streets. But he was worried to see that Captain Karpova was staring intently at the priest, hanging on his every word. "What have you seen?" she asked. Confessor came to a stop in front of the window, gripped his scepter with both hands, and tilted his head back. He closed his eyes and spoke in a singing song voice. "I can see it now, even as we stand talking in this room. The vision is with me, always. Praise the Emperor," rumbled the preacher, Roth closing his eyes. "I see myself carrying a Cadian banner and riding at the head of an armored column. I am leading a glorious host, and a wonderful thing it is." He opened his eyes and pointed his scepter at the papers on the table. "The host is advancing into a narrow gully, just like the one Captain Karpova has pointed out on the map." Karpova nodded. "And what happens in the gully? What do you see?" "Victory," he said the word quietly, but his eyes were flashing. "The Emperor's light is shining down on me, and the soldiers at my back. Your regiment, Captain, see the light. And they believe in the light, and it spurs them on to efforts no one could ever have imagined. Even from such hardened warriors, your troopers do not simply halt the Xenos. They root them, slice them into them like surgeon's blades, and cut the heart from the swarm." There were tears forming in his eyes as he pictured scenes only he could see. "They become one with me, the light, the cosmos, the Emperor. They are his fists slamming down on the monsters that have come to devour his children." The confessor leant back against the wall, breathless, his eyes still locked on Karpova. "It is a miracle." He shook his head, regaining his composure. "But until you looked at that map, I had no idea where or how it would take place. Now we have the name and the reason. We must strike the enemy at Korasa Gorge, and we must do it because that is where the Xenos will be the weakest." Castamon's orders were to protect the hive. Exactly. Exactly. And how can we do that if we let this host continue to Xerix? Look at those charts. The Ultramarines are already facing attacks from the south and the east. Maybe even from the west, if the Xenos can travel through the sea. They can hold, I'm sure, but Castamon is not expecting attack from the north. He thinks the enemy will move on us here, at the hive. That's why he granted you so many resources. And his logic was sound, but the Xenos are behaving oddly. They're ignoring the hive and throwing everything at Xerix. She gripped the handle of her saber, fixing him with a single furious eye. "We cannot allow that to happen." Karpova turned to the confessor. "I know nothing of holy visions, but the things you describe fit exactly with the tactics I would employ. We can trap their vanguard in a crossfire, rain death on their rearguard, driving them forwards into the kill zone. We could confuse them and send them into a frenzy. And all in that mayhem, I will be able to lead my most skilled troops and try to find whatever alpha creature seems to be commanding them. There must be something. A predator that's larger or stranger than the lesser breeds." "Do you know what would work?" asked Surak. "How much do you actually know about these monsters?" She continued glaring at him. "They are an enemy. An enemy always has a leader. I will single it out and behead the attack. It could be done in a matter of hours. We will make the northern approach to Xerix safe and then return here, ready to defend the hive against a counterattack." "This is madness." Surak was unable to hide his frustration. "We can't base our whole strategy on your wild guesses and he waved at Confessor Thurgow, "on a vision, on a dream that might be the result of an indigestion. It's lunacy." His outburst was followed by a pregnant silence. Thurgow looked shocked by what he had just said, and Karpova glanced at him. Roth tilted his head to one side and gave Surak a quizzical look. "Lunacy." His voice was low. "Is that how you describe the beliefs of a senior ecclesiarchy?" prelate. Sirach could feel Lanix stare burning into the side of his face. His aide was furious with him, but Sirach had never mastered the art of disassembling. We can't base our whole military strategy on something so vague. Roth took a deep breath, then he reached for something under his robes. Wait, Confessor Thurgow held up a hand. We've all been disconcerted by what we have seen. He gripped Roth's shoulder. The governor is a devout man, and I'm sure he did not mean to imply that the Ministronum doctrine is lunacy. He gave Sirach a kind look. Sirach felt a crushing sense of despair. No, he said quietly. Thurgow nodded. And you would not wish to hinder the plan I have discussed with Captain Karpova, would you? Sirach reached for an iho stick and lit it with a trembling finger, looking at the maps on the table. My prayers go with you. Chapter 20. The Fortress, City at Xerax, Samnium, Province, Regium. The fortress was surrounded by lights. As Damaris looked out from the battlements, she felt like the stars had fallen from the heavens. The sky was black and strange with no sign of constellations she was used to. But the slopes leading up to Xerax were clad in pinpricks of light. People were approaching the fortress from every direction, pouring from the forest to the east and the south, and from the hills in the north, and arriving at the coast to the west. All of them bathed in the light of torches and lumens. She had never seen so many people gathered in one place. Vela was at her side, leaning back on her stick, and the magistrate Erzin was standing a few feet away. But none of them had spoken for several minutes. Damaris was no longer trying to convince anyone that the crowds were fleeing political unrest. The people who poured through the gates brought shocking stories. Tales of monsters that tumbled and slithered from the sky, predators unlike anything seen in the Regium before. Some had seen their families torn apart and devoured, and no one dared look up, staring ashen faces at the ground. Not every now and then there was a pulse of light in the blackness, and each flash revealed a nightmare. Fleeting glimpses of the mass that had bottled out of the stars. It was not clouds or fumes, but coiling, heaving shapes, organs, limbs, too vast to be comprehended. Damaris was crushed by grief and fear. What was happening to her home? Regium had seen riots and war, but never anything on this scale. It looked like the end of the world. Ultramarines strode back and forth along the battlements, barking orders to the human soldiers who were manning the guns. They looked unfazed by what was happening overhead, but Damaris could not stop thinking how few they were in number. Everywhere an Ultramarine passed by, people regained their confidence, leaping to obey, reassured by Space Marines' implacable confidence. But there were only a few handful of them, less than 40, she guessed. It was her fault there were so few. She glanced at Erzin, thinking back over their lunatic decision to redirect the other squad. How could she have agreed to such a plan? The shock of seeing the caves destroyed must have robbed her of her senses. She could remember the absolute confidence she had felt at the time, but the belief that it was right to make a fool of Castamon. But now, as the darkness pressed in, she wanted to leap back in time and make herself see sense. Erzin caught her glance and stared back at her, looking panicked, no doubt imagining what would happen if she revealed what they had done. They would be executed, certainly. But as she felt the sky grinding and churning overhead, the idea of being shot seemed almost like a blessing. What is it? Vela snapped, noticing how they were looking at each other. What are you looking so shamefaced? What do you mean? Said Erzin, his panicked tone making it even more clear that they had something to hide. Damaris? Said the old woman, frowning at her. Damaris had never lied to Vela. Everything she had achieved, her rise to the rank of consul was down to the old woman's trust in her. Could she tell her? Perhaps Vela could help undo the damage. No, she decided. Falsifying imperial orders was an act of unpardonable heresy. She could not involve Vela in that. She shook her head and looked away, too ashamed to meet Vela's eyes. Whatever it is, began Vela, her cheeks flushing, you'd best start. She was interrupted by a commotion further down the wall. So today I decided to come down to my LGS. Their name is Taps. Benefit about these guys is they have some tables upstairs. It's a drop-in, and they have lights and little mats. You can bring your own paint. So let's go inside. One of the Ultramarines had its head tilted and its fingers pressed to its helmet, while the others were gathering around him. The Ultramarine nodded, looked up, and pointed into the night, gesturing to the hills of the north of the fortress and saying, "Is this it?" muttered Vela. "Is it beginning?" "Is what beginning?" whispered Erzin, pawing anxiously at his wild hair and looking at the crowds outside the wall. A low rumbling drone swelled from the darkness, growing quicker and louder. "Why aren't they doing anything?" cried Erzin, staring at the Ultramarines. "They're just standing there like..." His question was answered as Castamon's gunship rumbled into view, looming out of the darkness and landing lights blinking and revealing blue and white Ultramarines insignia. Cheers rose from the people in the streets below, and even Damaris found herself mouthing a prayer. Castamon's unshakable conviction had always enraged her, but in the face of what she had seen at the gates, it now seemed like a lifeline. "Let's get to the landing pad," she said, helping Vela towards the steps. "He must have news from Port Dura. He will have answers." They entered the crush at the bottom of the steps and had to fight their way through the crowds. "When do we stop letting people in?" muttered Erzin, grimacing at the mob pressed close. "Are we expected to house the entire province in one fortress?" Damaris scowled at him. The more she thought about it, the more incredible she found the idea that she had entered into a conspiracy with such a cowardly man. She had always considered him vaguely unpleasant, but she now realized how poisonous he was. "Would you rather lock them outside?" So, I know I said it's been like 5 months since the last video, in the beginning of this video, and now it's been like 2 more months, I think, since I said that. Let's ignore that previous one and just go with this one. I know it's been a long time, but hopefully you're enjoying the videos. Okay, so we've mostly done the painting, and now I'm going to use some of the scenic glue, basically wood glue. I just bought it at a hobby shop, so Woodland Scenics gets the credit for it. You can just go to Home Depot and buy white wood glue, same damn thing. I'm going to put it on the base, and then I'm also going to put on this kind of extremely small sand grit stuff. Bought it from our local dollar store. And then I'm going to put some tufts from Citadel Colors, and then some bigger Green Stuff World tufts. I don't know if you guys can see that in there, but yeah, let's base this out, and after it's spaced out, it will be close to a reveal. "Walls?" She waved at the shapes churning in the sky. "To face that?" "No, of course not. I just worry that we cannot house so many people in comfort. I have no need of a bed myself, of course, and I..." His words trailed off as he looked up at the sky and lost his thread. He looked terrified. She ignored him, struggling on through the crowd streets until she saw the landing platform up ahead. Yep. For the final stage, we're going to try something new. So I went to my local art store and I got burnt sienna tint pan pastel artist panel. So according to the little description that they have on the set of them, it's used for art, but it's also used for miniatures and models. So I figured that we give her a whirl, put it on his wings, and then afterwards we'll hit him with a clear varnish, and then he should be done. So hopefully this turns out the way that we want it to. But so these are like $11 apparently if they're not broken. But I was not really caring that it was broken because it's powder and I'm just putting it on a model. So basically, in a sense, it's dry brushing the model on his wings, so it gives it like a very matte kind of thing, but it brings out the highlights of everything you did. So I'll put it in his joints as well so that they're not extremely red and they look like they're just underneath a layer of flesh. So don't need very much. You can just put a little bit on your dry brush and then you can wipe it off on the, I'm using tracing paper, but you can just wipe it off on the tracing paper and then go in there, coat the places you need coating. 2 seconds there, guys. I have a fur ball that wants in. Come on, boo-boo. Yeah, you. Yeah, come on. Sorry for the distraction. Anybody that has them knows you can't have closed doors. Kind of nice because I did my underlayers, but then when you apply this, it literally just looks like there is that soft tone of membrane over all of his extremity joints. Again, makes it look like there's that little bit of skin being pulled taut over top of all of those bending joints, kind of like what's in your knee and your elbow and all that stuff. So yeah, now I'll reveal them to you guys. Bring them in there so you can see. There we go. Yeah. And there, my hair site with more checks.